7 million out-of-school children. Welcome. Live at UN headquarters in New York right now. A special session is just beginning involving the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, who is today beginning proceedings at UN headquarters. Very unusual proceedings because they're being billed as a youth takeover. The idea is that young people around the world are going to talk about education and the barriers to it. This is what we're seeing live from UN headquarters right now. Malala Yousafzai, the campaigner who was shot and nearly killed by the Taliban in Pakistan, is going to be speaking live in a moment. She's been brought to the UN by the global envoy for education, the former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who is speaking right now. So we will be bringing you live coverage of this in just a moment. But first, let's just give you a sense of what the global picture in terms of access to education for both girls and boys is like, because it is a pretty shocking picture. In all, 57 million children worldwide are out of school. More than half of them live in conflict-affected countries. One of the other biggest barriers, as you might imagine, is poverty. Nigeria, Pakistan and Ethiopia have the worst records in terms of numbers of children who are out of school, although of those three, Ethiopia is said to be making substantial progress. Well, Malala's story has highlighted and also personalised the struggle for education, so much so that the UN has designated this Malala Day. Our Pakistan correspondent has been following this journey closely, and we're going to be talking about this throughout the programme. With me to discuss education around the world are a panel of guests. BBC journalist Nell Hidayat, who has lived in both Afghanistan and Pakistan and also made a documentary on this issue. Lorraine Dodge, a former head teacher who spent 2 years volunteering in Nepal as an education advisor. Imtiaz Dosa from the Citizens Foundation charity, which runs nearly 1,000 schools in Pakistan. And Samson Kambalu, an artist who has written about his childhood being educated in Malawi. Welcome to you all. Samson, start by just telling us about your education in Malawi, because it's worth remembering that although Malala's story is about South Asia and a very extreme example, many of the out-of-school children we're talking about are in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, well, of course, it's a poor part of the world. It's a very poor part. And the education is like in the extremes. You start off in primary school, like in my case, we started education under a tree. You walk long distance and you go do everything under a tree, and you learn your lessons, you write on broken pieces of slate, for instance. And then from then you progress into the classroom. And the classrooms are usually crowded, and so it was a kind of, you could tell that education made all the difference. Education is so valued because what education does, the difference it makes was all around you. If you couldn't read or write, you knew where you would end up. And if you
It was your chance. It was your chance for a better life.
That's right.
I mean, when you talk about extremes of education, you ended up then at a school that is widely regarded as the Eton of Africa.
That's right.
How did that come about?
At the age of 13, 14, there were exams, so it was open to all the pupils of like the country. So you competed up and down the country, and they used to select 3 pupils from every district. And so what you did was to spend a year studying night and day, trying to get in. Yeah. And then once you got in, it was like a lottery, you know. And I remember when I got selected to go to this school, a friend of mine, from now on, all that's wrong with the world you will only see on TV. So, yeah, I was lucky.
Yeah. Lorraine Dodge, I mean, you were a head teacher in Britain, and then you decided to take your skills abroad. Where did you go and what did you find when you got there?
I volunteered with VSO and I went to Nepal for 2 years. It's a very different culture, it's a very different way of training teachers, and it's a very different education system. So in the schools that I went to, I was met with a lot of enthusiasm for education. People in the education office just want to know so much, and they want their children to achieve. And that seemed to be a really strong thrust in the areas that I was working with. So I could work with the education office, and they wanted to know about the management structures so that they could support their head teachers in school, and so that they could also enable the head teachers to support the teachers who are working in the schools on an everyday basis.
Yeah, of course, there's so many more issues, aren't there, surrounding education, teacher training, all those kinds of things. I want to turn now to Imtiaz Dosa, because you represent the Citizens Foundation, which has a remarkable record of building and operating schools in Pakistan. Does the kind of thirst for education exist in a country where we know from Malala's story getting girls into school is so difficult?
I think there is an insatiable appetite for education, not just boys but girls as well. I think parents everywhere, really, in Pakistan certainly, and in fact in the more traditional, conservative, poorer communities, know that education is the only real route, the only real escape, if you like, out of the poverty in which they find themselves. So yes, I think there is an insatiable demand for education. There isn't, of course, the supply, but there is undoubtedly...
But if they have limited resources, would they rather educate their sons than their daughters?
Yes, I would say there is this issue of, sons having priorities, and I think that in our own case, in our fee structure, which is heavily subsidized, we do skew it in favor of girls, so that if you've got girls and boys, if you've got sons and daughters, we do make the daughters much cheaper to educate, so that parents will
so
have an incentive. I know it's just a way of, because for us, a key requirement is that we have 50% girls, and for that, this is one of
you have to work actively then to make that happen.
Yes.
Now, what have you seen? Because you've made a whole documentary on this subject. What did you see when you filmed in Pakistan?
The thirst you guys have been speaking about is completely and utterly, like, it's everywhere in Pakistan. I went to a few places. I went to Karachi, I went to Islamabad, I went to Swabi, and everywhere I went there were little kids who were just absolutely desperate to get to school. Now, I was born in Kabul in Afghanistan, one of the poorest countries in the world, so my family who are still there, I know firsthand, just like Samson, how important it is for them to go to school. But the problem is people in the Western world, people in the UK, can't really grasp that. They don't quite understand, because everyone goes to school here. It's completely normal and acceptable. But like Samson said, and I completely agree, for them, it's a way out of poverty. It's a way to better themselves. It's sometimes the only way they have to actually make a life for themselves. The only reason, for example, I'm here, I was able to come here, was because my mum knew that the only way to get me an education wasn't in a country run by the Taliban, but it was to come to the UK and get one, and that's what I did.
Yeah, but I mean, so we can all agree that the thirst is there, but it is so sobering when you think of the numbers. 57 million children, Samson, who don't have any access to school. I guess, there is a question, isn't there, about whether you go for a quality education or whether you just try and get as many of those children as possible into some kind of schooling, whatever the quality.
I think that it's good. I think everybody should have a right to a basic education. I think, and what I'm talking about here is actually competition for basic education. Fine, I went to a prestigious school, but for the majority of the people, it was a struggle even to just get basic education. Because when I was growing up, you had to pay. It's free now, but you had to pay, and many couldn't afford, so they dropped out. Of the about 70% of kids who used to go to school, about 50% of those who enrolled would end up, dropping out maybe in the third year or something. So in terms of luxury, education as a luxury, that's another story. But I think that we in Southern Africa are still struggling with basic education.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get more thoughts from everyone on the panel shortly, but I just want to go to the UN because actually we are very close to hearing this speech from Malala Yousafzai. And remember, we haven't seen much of her at all since she was discharged from hospital. This is certainly the first time that she's going to be delivering a major speech, one of the very few times we'll have seen her at all since she was discharged from hospital. So live now to the UN because our correspondent Rajini Vajanathan is standing by. She is going to be addressing the question of access to education, Rajini, in this speech.
That's right. What's going to be happening today is all the young people who are gathering here, more than 500 from more than 80 countries, will also get together and, along with Malala Yousafzai, come up with a proposal which will be put forward to the Secretary General. And Malala Yousafzai is expected to talk about her dream for a universal education. As you said before, Michelle, some 57 million children out of school around the world. And also put a proposal forward to guarantee that every child has at least 9 years in school. But of course, as you've been discussing just there, some of the issues relate to mindset as well. We've heard from Gordon Brown, the UN Special Envoy on Education just now. He's been speaking in the chamber and he described the situation at the moment as an education emergency. And he talked about the issues of child marriage and also the other cultural issues that people face. He said there's also 4 billion shortage of classrooms around the world. But the other thing I've picked up from speaking to some of the young people here over the past few days is that it's not just about getting a place in school, but it's also about getting to school. I've met young people here who say it takes them 2 or 3 hours, some travelling from rural areas, to actually make it to the classroom. Others who say that their journey is fraught with problems, men harassing them, catcalling at them, giving them problems as they try and get to school.
Rajini, stay with us and we'll bring the live coverage from the UN just as soon as Malala starts speaking. But I just want to get a thought from Lorraine Dodge, because you worked in Nepal for some time. Lorraine, what, in your experience, what was the biggest barrier to primary education there?
I think the biggest barrier was actually keeping children in school, because when you spoke earlier about should we have quality education or any education, I think you just have to remember that some of these very young children are working in really dangerous occupations, and if we can take them away from them and put them into safe places to begin with, then I think we can build up the quality of the education.
So anything that you do in an educational framework is better than the lives that they're living?
I would argue so, but importantly for families, you have to remember that those children who are working, they need that. There is such a high level of poverty that all members of the family have to contribute to that lifestyle. So education is such a great luxury, I think, for some of these families. And some of the families make great contributions. They are getting themselves in huge levels of debts. They owe money to banks, to money lenders, to enable their children to go to school. So they deserve and they should have a quality education, but which is developing. It doesn't all have to start now, but we should be slowly working towards that.
Yeah. Well, let's return now to Rajini at the UN. It's sobering, Rajini, to think that while progress has been made on so many other development goals, it does feel as if the pace of progress on education is slower, even though overall the trend is going in the right direction.
That's right, and it's not just about the statistics. I think the mood as well, and what this whole event here, this UN Youth Takeover, has given certainly the young people here is a sense of confidence that things can actually change. It is sad that this has only really come to global attention in the way it has because of the events that unfolded last year and what's happened to Malala Yousafzai. But there is a lot of positive energy here that such a tragic incident that happened to her has now been turned into something hugely positive and something that young people can focus on. And one thing that's really a takeaway from this whole event is that she is being seen as a real role model to people from, as I say, more than 80 countries around the world. So many different people who can share that same quest and goal to better and improve access to education for not just women, of course, but also everyone, boys and girls around the world. And that is something that I think will hopefully give some energy to the campaign, to political as well as obviously just practical measures to try and ensure that more people have access to a school and to a classroom.
Well, Malala Yousafzai is sitting there listening at the UN. She hasn't been introduced as yet, but we'll carry her speech live just as soon as she begins speaking. Nell Hidayat, in your filming in Pakistan, did people talk about Malala? Was she viewed as a role model?
She was viewed as a role model to some, but to others. I mean, I spoke to Shainat and over there, when I was over there, I spoke to the other two girls that were also injured in the attack. But the problem is that lots of people are scared. Lots of people are scared that lots of mothers and fathers are scared to send their kids to school because they've seen what's happened to Malala. And the Taliban knew what they were doing when they did that. The point is fear. The point is that they want an entire community, an entire village. I'm sure you've seen this, Jess. They want people to be petrified, absolutely terrified to send their kids to school. And another thing is I'm not sure I completely agree that any education is the right way forward. Some of these places, some of these schools in Pakistan do have basic education, but I mean, these kids, these girls are competing on a global level. And the problem is when they finish primary school, when they finish secondary school, they are nowhere near sort of the levels they need to be on par with, say, the UK or even China or anywhere. So it's not a case of just basic education. They've got to get good education.
Well, let's ask Imtiaz Dosa what you think of the quality versus quantity argument, if you like, because your schools have a really good record, but the numbers that you can educate are small compared to the need in Pakistan.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, we have a model which is extremely economical, which produces superlative quality of education. And I think part of what TCF is about is to have a template which is capable of being rolled out right across the country, because we have 910 schools, across all the 4 provinces. If a government was to ever have the will to want to provide good basic education right across the country, the TCF template, the TCF model is there. So you can have, if you run things properly, our education is, of course, run on very, very strict, transparent lines.
What is your attendance like? Because attendance is often a difficulty.
Is very high. I mean, the children there know that this is, the route. This is, it's a wonderful environment. The teachers are highly motivated. The head teachers are wonderful. The salaries we pay our teachers are half the level what the government pays, and yet our outputs are and our outcomes are 50, 60, 80% higher than the rest of the state sector.
I mean, it sounds like you've got it worked out, but the numbers you are able to reach are tiny compared to the millions of children in Pakistan who don't have an education.
That is absolutely true. So all we can do is, we have 910 schools. Pakistan has 150,000 schools. All we can do is provide a template and hope and pray that one day the government will see the light, will have the will, and want to roll out, these standard good quality schools right across the country.
If I could just interject, it's also about the will of the people. It's fine to say, the governments need to get behind this, and I'm sure Malala's going to stand up and say this, that it's got to be a global effort. But at the end of the day, we're talking about ideology. We're talking about changing mindsets. In the KPK region alone, we're talking about very conservative people. So the fight isn't just about building more schools. Building more schools is important, but not as important as getting the girls there, and ideology is a big factor in that.
Samson Kambalu, I mean, you don't have the ideological battle in sub-Saharan Africa that they're talking about there. What would make a real difference to the community that you grew up in Malawi?
To start with, I think a good basic education. When I was growing up, the emphasis was on the academic, you prepare yourself academically. Now the emphasis on practical education, like farming, etc. But not everybody can become a farmer, so that has an effect of degrading the quality of the education. I mean, you can see it in my family. The spectrum. I grew up in a family of 8, and amongst this, you can see the literacy rate kind of going down, if you like.
Really?
Yes, I think it was much more rigorous when I was growing up, and then by the time the siblings that came after me the emphasis.
So you can see the difference within your family. Well, let me just take everyone back to the UN for a moment, because actually Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, is speaking now, and he is just about to introduce today's main speaker, Malala Yousafzai.
Most of us celebrate a birthday with a party or perhaps a day off. Malala chose to mark her 16th birthday at the United Nations, celebrating her cause for education. And I thank for her vision, and my warmest congratulations on your birthday, and happy birthday to you. In fact, the United Nations marked the 1,000-day countdown for action for Millennium Development Goals. On that very particular day, that was April 5th, I was thinking of somebody, whom should I speak and with whom should I spend this day? If I'm not able to meet anybody, then at least talk to somebody who would give a strong message for this 1,000-day countdown for Millennium Development Goals. I decided to speak to Malala. I took up my telephone, but in fact, we Skyped. Using all this tech-savvy, As you know, Millennium Development Goals #2 priority is education. On that day, I wanted to reach out to her and ask her to send out a strong message for the importance of education and empowering women and girls. On that special day for the United Nations and development, we called on her and for her action. And now, on her special day, she's calling us now. She's calling on us to keep our promises, invest in young people, and put education first. My message is that this world is very young. More than half of the global population is young people under the age of 25 years of age. So this world is young. Then it is only natural that we pay more attention to the aspirations of young people, all of you, including Malala. So I have asked her to raise our voices and send out strong message, what your aspirations, what your concerns would be to the world today. Use this forum properly, send out your strong messages to the world so that your parents and your leaders of the country can listen your aspirations. Ladies and gentlemen, she was targeted just because of her determination to go to school and learn. Targeting Malala, extremists showed what they feared most, a girl with a book. When girls are educated, when young people are educated, then that's what the terrorists are fearful most, rather than any other tools. I was so heartened and encouraged by the groundswell of support for Malala. It started with the people of Pakistan, who stood up and said, "I am Malala." Special Envoy on Global Education, Mr. Gordon Brown, rallied the world, and millions of signatures were collected in support. It was a clear call to Malala. You are not alone. We are all with you, standing behind you. By sharing this special day at the United Nations, she is now telling the Malalas around the world that they are not alone. Governments and partners around the world have made important progress in education. UNESCO and UNICEF have helped to lead the support of the UN family. Yet we have much work to do. 57 million children are not in school. We have to bring all these 57 million people to the school by the end of 2015. That's our strong commitment of the United Nations. Most of them are girls, among 57 million. Half live in conflict-affected areas. At a time when we must step up our efforts, international aid for basic education has declined for the first time in a decade. And as we have tragically seen in several countries around the world, most recently in Nigeria, where children were attacked by all these terrorists at the school. The schools must be a safe haven, safe place for all the children, girls and boys, and their teachers also have been targeted. This is an unacceptable situation. They have been threatened, they have been assaulted, they have been killed. We cannot let this happen again. No children should have to die for going to school. Nowhere should teachers fear to teach or children fear to learn. Together we can change this picture. This is the vision of my Global Education First initiative. It has 3 priorities. Bring all the children to the school, give them quality education, and foster the global citizenship. I didn't have to learn about the importance of education from a textbook. I lived it. As Golden Brown has just introduced, my village, my whole country was destroyed by the Korean War. And I had to study in the open, under the trees. When it rained, there was no school. We were very poor. We were hungry. Our stomachs were empty. But also we were hungry and thirsty for education. That's why I was able to learn more about the world. I was able to learn more about my country, about my world. This is my story and story of my country. All of you have your own stories, your own experiences, your own voices. I thank you for bringing those voices together today. But this should not be the only day. We have to continue. Then world leaders must listen to your voices. You are leaders in education. That is why you are here. I urge you to keep speaking out. Keep raising the pressure. Keep making a difference. And together, let us follow the lead of this brave young girl, Malala. Let us put education first. Let us make this world better for all. And let us shape the future we want. And I thank Malala and happy birthday again. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
And now the moment you've been waiting for, when the youth takeover begins. Malala, it is a miracle that you are here with us today. You had to overcome an attempt on your life. You had to suffer grievous injuries inflicted by a gun. You spent months in hospital. You had to recover your strength to even be able to go back to school. You have been taken from your own country that you love. But yet today, here on your 16th birthday, you're at the United Nations urging us to do more to support the campaign for girls' and boys' education. You are an inspiration to us all. You are challenging us to do more. Never before, I believe, has a 16th birthday been celebrated in this way. But never before either have we had a teenager that has shown such courage. And never before have we had a teenager who is so passionate about the future of education. So as Malala comes to the stage to speak to you, let me repeat the words the Taliban never wanted her to hear. Happy 16th birthday, Malala.
Thank you. Thank you. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Honorable UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, respected President General Assembly, Vok Yaramich, Honorable UN Envoy for Global Education, Mr. Gordon Brown, respected elders, and my dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Today, it is an honor for me to be speaking again after a long time. Being here with such honorable people is a great moment in my life. And it's an honor for me that today I'm wearing a shawl of Benazir Bhutto Shaheed. I don't know where to begin my speech. I don't know what people would be expecting me to say. But first of all, thank you to God, for whom we all are equal. And thank you to every person who has prayed for my fast recovery and a new life. I cannot believe how much love people have shown me. I have received thousands of good wish cards and gifts from all over the world. Thank you to all of them. Thank you to the children whose innocent words encouraged me. Thank you to my elders whose prayers strengthened me. I would like to thank my nurses, doctors, and the staff of the hospitals in Pakistan, in the UK, in the UAE government, who have helped me to get better and recover my strength. I fully support Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, in his Global Education First initiative, and the work of the UN Special Envoy, Mr. Gordon Brown, and the respected President General Assembly, Vok Yaramich. I thank all of them for their leadership that they continue to give. They continue to inspire all of us to action. Dear brothers and sisters, do remember one thing. Malala Day is not my day. Today is the day of every woman, every boy, and every girl who have raised their voice for their rights. There are hundreds of human rights activists and social workers who are not only speaking for their rights, but who are struggling to achieve their goal of peace, education, and equality. Thousands of people have been killed by the terrorists, and millions have been injured. I'm just one of them. So here I stand,
So here I stand, one girl among many. I speak not for myself, but for those without voice can be heard. Those who have fought for their rights. Their right to live in peace. Their right to be treated with dignity. Their right to equality of opportunity. Their right to be educated. Dear friends, on the 9th of October 2012, the Taliban shot me on the left side of my forehead. They shot my friends too. They thought that the bullet would silence us, but they failed. And out of that silence came thousands of voices. The terrorists thought that they would change my aims and stop my ambitions. But nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born. I am the same Malala. My ambitions are the same. My hopes are the same. And my dreams are the same. Dear sisters and brothers, I'm not against anyone. Neither am I here to speak in terms of personal revenge against the Taliban or any other terrorist group. I'm here to speak up for the right of education of every child. I want education for the sons and daughters of the Taliban and all the terrorists and extremists. I do not even hate the Talib who shot me. Even if there is a gun in my hand and he stands in front of me, I would not shoot him. This is the compassion that I have learned from Muhammad, the Prophet of Mercy, and Jesus Christ and Lord Buddha. This is the legacy of change that I have inherited from Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. This is the philosophy of non-violence that I have learned from Gandhiji, Bacha Khan, and Mother Teresa. And this is the forgiveness that I have learned from my father and from my mother. And this is what my soul is telling me. Be peaceful and love everyone. Dear sisters and brothers, we realize the importance of light when we see darkness. We realize the importance of our voice when we are silenced. In the same way, when we were in Swat, the north of Pakistan, we realized the importance of pens and books when we saw the guns. The wise saying, "The pen is mightier than sword," was true. The extremists were and they are afraid of books and pens. The power of education frightens them. They are afraid of women. The power of the voice of women frightens them. And that is why they killed 14 innocent students in the recent attack in Quetta. And that is why they killed female teachers and polio workers in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. That is why they're blasting schools every day, because they were and they are afraid of change, afraid of equality that we will bring into our society. And I remember that there was a boy in our school who was asked by a journalist, why are the Taliban against education? He answered very simply by pointing to his book. He said, a Talib doesn't know what is written inside this book. They think that God is a tiny little conservative being who would send girls to the hell just because of going to school. The terrorists are misusing the name of Islam and Pashtun society for their own personal benefits. Pakistan is a peace-loving democratic country. Pashtuns want education for their daughters and sons. And Islam is a religion of peace, humanity, and brotherhood. Islam says it's not only each child's right to get education, rather it's their duty and responsibility. Honorable Secretary General, peace is necessary for education. In many parts of the world, especially Pakistan and Afghanistan, terrorism, wars, and conflicts stop children to go to their schools. We are really tired of these wars. Women and children are suffering in many ways in many parts of the world. In India, innocent and poor children are victims of child labor. Many schools have been destroyed in Nigeria. People in Afghanistan have been affected by the hurdles of extremism for decades. Young girls have to do domestic child labor and are forced to get married at early age. Poverty, ignorance, injustice, racism, and the deprivation of basic rights are the main problem faced by both men and women. Dear fellows, today I'm focusing on women's rights and girls' education because they're suffering the most. There was a time when women social activists asked men to stand up for their rights, but this time we will do it by ourselves. I'm not telling men to step away from speaking for women's rights. Rather, I'm focusing on women to be independent, to fight for themselves. So, dear sisters and brothers, now it's time to speak up. So today, we call upon the world leaders to change their strategic policies in favor of peace and prosperity. We call upon the world leaders that all the peace deals must protect women's and children's rights. A deal that goes against the rights of women is unacceptable. We call upon all governments to ensure free, compulsory education all over the world for every child. We call upon all the governments to fight against terrorism and violence, to protect children from brutality and harm. We call upon the developed nations to support the expansion of educational opportunities for girls in the developing world. We call upon all the communities to be tolerant, to reject prejudice based on caste, creed, sect, color, religion, or gender, to ensure freedom and equality for women so that they can flourish. We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back. We call upon our sisters around the world to be brave, to embrace the strength within themselves and realize their full potential. Dear brothers and sisters, we want schools and education for every child's bright future. We will continue our journey to our destination of peace and education. No one can stop us. We will speak up for our rights, and we will bring change through our voice. We believe in the power and the strength of our words. Our words can change the whole world because we are all together, united for the cause of education. And if we want to achieve our goal, then let us empower ourselves with the weapon of knowledge. And let us shield ourselves with unity and togetherness. Dear brothers and sisters, we must not forget that millions of people are suffering from poverty, injustice, and ignorance. We must not forget that millions of children are out of their schools. We must not forget that our sisters and brothers are waiting for a bright, peaceful future. So let us wage a global struggle against illiteracy, poverty, and terrorism. Let us pick up our books and our pens. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. Education is the only solution. Education first. Thank you.
Well, this has been a really remarkable speech at the UN. It's already a remarkable gathering because it's being called a youth takeover. But Malala Yousafzai, who is 16 today, has delivered really a call to arms for the cause of education around the world. 9 months ago, this teenager was nearly killed by the Taliban. She came so very close to losing her life. But not only has she made an extraordinary physical recovery, but on her 16th birthday, she has spoken live at the UN in front of the Secretary General. Her speech has been carried live right around the world. She said that it was a message of forgiveness and compassion, that she was speaking for those without a voice, saying that she was just one victim of terrorists who thought that the bullets would silence us, but they failed. And she called for people around the world to pick up what she called the weapon of knowledge and to fight a global struggle for education. So a really remarkable speech at the UN. Clearly, Malala Yousafzai is no ordinary 16-year-old. Just want to take a moment to explain a bit of the background to her story, because not everyone knows that actually the first public exposure she ever had was because of BBC Urdu, because she wrote an anonymous blog on the BBC Urdu website. Some of it was also translated onto the English website, and you can actually still see it online right now. So we will shortly be getting a sense from BBC Urdu about how her journey into the public eye began. And of course, today at the UN, we've just seen the pinnacle of that journey so far with this live address at the UN. Let's get some reaction to this from the world's newsroom, because Anne-Marie Tomczak has been looking at that. It was really a call to arms, Anne-Marie, and she really wants this battle, if I can put it that way, to be fought right around the world for education.
Yes, a very, very strong speech there by Malala, and lots of reaction all over the world to this. I've been speaking to our social media teams here on the 5th floor at the Language Services. Firstly, BBC World's Facebook page, when we posted about it, within an hour we already received 400 shares and over 200 comments. And the common theme is that Malala is a beacon of hope for children around the world. One comment from Augustino J says, the struggle for women's rights to education has just begun. Let's take the Malala struggle to the whole world. Now, interestingly, BBC's Pashto Facebook page has had a mixed number of comments. Some of them talk about how Malala is used by international organisations for their own agenda. And one comment there by Abdul Khan, he says, I don't understand why BBC Pashto is going on about Malala all the time. There are hundreds of Malalas across Afghanistan doing things Malala did, going through worse situations than Malala. How come no one cares about them? And also, interestingly, I was talking to the social media editor of the Urdu service, and he said that 99% of comments coming in about Malala were actually negative, which actually was quite surprising, given the day in question on her birthday and on Malala Day. Now, the BBC's Africa Facebook page, a lot of people writing in about the issue of education in general and just about the challenges that a lot of African children are facing in getting a decent education, one of them being getting decent facilities. Irma from Nigeria wrote in saying the government is doing the best it can to get children off the streets, but reading materials and even chairs to sit on are in sparse supply. Back over to you, Michelle.
Anne-Marie, thanks very much indeed. So Malala Yousafzai, speaking at the UN, has given us an opportunity to talk about education right around the world. But let's explain a little bit more about Malala's own personal story, and particularly her connection with BBC Urdu, because live in the newsroom now is Shafi Nakijami from BBC Urdu. Just explain to us, Shafi, because not everyone knows this story, how she first came to write for BBC Urdu.
Well, it's a fascinating story. Not many people know that Malala is as eloquent or as fluent in her own language, in English. Actually, she speaks 3 languages, and no one knows that either. And no one knows that was the first time the BBC Urdu service started publishing her diary. That story started in December 2008 and ran up to 2009 March, in which 12 diaries were written. Each time she will read her own diary that will go on air, and that will come on our website, bbcurdu.com. What was the page about? She was at that time, let's say 10 or 11-year-old, so she used to go mama, papa, daddy, uncle, and all those people, and she would tell the story about her school, not the day-to-day routine, but how much she is missing her school because of the circumstances in her area, because of the Taliban takeover, and Taliban were coming really heavily on the school. So what she did, she used to tell people. So she started telling one of our journalists, her team, and that journalist actually started writing it in a very eloquent way, which was published. If you have time, I can give you the page, just a one page, which we published on our website, bbcurdu.com. That was episode 3, Monday, the 5th January, 2009. And she writes, I was getting ready for school and about to wear my uniform when I remembered that our principal had told us not to wear uniforms and come to school wearing a normal clothes instead. So I decided to wear my favorite pink dress. Other girls in the school were also wearing colorful dresses, and the school presented a homely atmosphere and look. Then she says about the class, my friend came to me and said, for God's sake, answer me honestly. Is our school going to be attacked by Taliban? During the morning assembly, we were told not to wear even colorful clothes, as Taliban would object to it. So you see, that was the story, and we were publishing. BBCUrdu.com was publishing, and that was the most popular feature on our website. The hits we have and the popularity of her diary, it was immense. It was colossal coverage all over the Pakistani media, and she used to write diary, that's an interesting thing, with the name of Gul Makai. It's a Urdu, a Farsi, a Pashto name, but means corn flower. But no one knew.
So that was her nom de plume then, if you like.
Exactly.
Shafi, thank you very much indeed. I should make it clear that it was not the BBC which eventually revealed Malala's identity. She actually decided to go public herself and said that she was indeed the person who'd become known online by that time as Gul Makai. That was her pseudonym in her blog for BBC Urdu. Well, let's get some reaction now, because we've been taking the opportunity of Malala speak at the UN to talk about education right around the world, and I have a panel of guests who are here with me now. Lorraine Dodge, let's just ask you first of all. You have taught in Britain and also seen education in Nepal. Do you think Malala's message is one that travels?
I think it's absolutely wonderful. Just listening to her today, you respond as an individual and you want to do something about it. I was fortunate enough to go with voluntary service overseas and actually make a difference. So we were looking at the training of teachers, so looking at to expand the number of children who could come into school and encourage them to come into school, but actually looking at the quality of the teachers and how we could support them in there. There are so many reasons why children don't come to school, and one of the reasons that some of the children, the girl children in particular, didn't come to school is they only had one uniform to share between the whole family. So it meant that they obviously couldn't all come.
So only one person could go. Samson, that's the thing. Malala's story is really extreme, but there are very basic barriers, often just sheer lack of funds, that prevent children going to school.
Yes, but I think a good education is just a matter of initiative. For me, basic critical thinking is important. You know, for instance, I have here what I call the Holy Ball. It's a football plastered with pages of the Bible.
You're an artist. You made this, right?
That's right, yeah. So
what does it mean to you?
Well, for me, it represents the ideal in education, which is critical thinking, the ability to be able to stand on your own and think for yourself. For me, that's good enough. If education is able to do this, it's good enough. That's a great starting point.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the argument about the quality of education, because there's lots and lots of teaching that doesn't actually teach critical thinking. I want to turn now to Imtiaz Dosa and to you, Nell Hidayat. Imtiaz Dosa, just going back to Malala's own personal story, here she is, incredibly high profile now, clearly a remarkable young woman. Will she ever be able to go back to her own country?
Sadly, I would say not. I mean, you know, but what she's done, I think, here, and what she's sacrificed, if you like, her ability to go back to Pakistan for, is to throw down the gauntlet to the West and say, really, that it must be a self-evident truth that the only bedrock on which you can build an equitable or a sustainable development is education.
Why to the West? What about the governments like Pakistan, which are spending more on defence than they are on education?
Sure. Well, I guess what you're saying is true as well. I mean, the UK government has been amazingly generous in its education aid to Pakistan. And so, yes, but yes, you know, obviously the Pakistan government needs to obviously change. You know, hopefully that will happen. There's been elections. We all hope that this will happen now. But you're right. Ultimately, that is the only bedrock on which, you know, if the Pakistan government wants development to happen, then it has to be through education. It may take 10 years, it may take 20 years.
It may take generations.
But it's the only bedrock on which you can do this.
Nell, what did you think of her message? I mean, we already know that she's a very special teenager. What did you think of what she said?
I've got 2 points to make. Firstly, I mean, I completely respect the opinion that the West, the wealthier nations in the world, must do their part to encourage kids in not-so-wealthy countries to have access to education. But it's the countries themselves that must take responsibility. The Afghanistani government, the Pakistani government, any government which has a problem with education must take up that responsibility themselves. It's all well and good saying, well, the West has the money. Well, actually, no. You know, the fact that in Pakistan, for every one boys' school, for every one girls' school, there are 2 boys' schools built. That's really not the way we should be thinking. And
her message, the meaning of what she said?
I think it's I mean, I was smiling throughout the whole thing. I've been waiting for her to speak for such a long time, having made a documentary about what she stands for. And going to Pakistan, I completely understand what she's saying is going to resonate with so many young people around the world. And I just hope they get to hear that message. And if it can change a few parents, a few people's, a few uncles, aunties' minds, then that's enough.
A few
really.
governments, that would be a real achievement. Well, thank you very much to all of you, because we've managed to use this to really talk about education. Let's not forget there are 57 million out-of-school children in so many different countries around the world. So thank you very much, Nal Hidayat Imtiaz Dosa, Samson Kambalu, and also Lorraine Dodge. Thank you. Now, while we've been on air, actually, there has been some news coming into us relating to Edward Snowden. So let's just take a moment to talk about this. This is the first picture that we have received of Edward Snowden since this bizarre state of affairs where he went public first in Hong Kong and then in Moscow. This is him in a meeting with human rights lawyers who actually met him at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport. Let's get a very quick update from our Moscow correspondent, Oleg Boldarev. What was the result of this meeting, Oleg?
Well, as some people expected, Edward Snowden decided to seek asylum in Russia. WikiLeaks are promising the official statement later on, but all those who